Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, today we're getting in something huge, a concept that's really reshaping things globally: sustainable development. You've asked us to unpack, that complex link between how economies grow and the health of our planet. And we've got some really rich sources to guide us here. Our mission, like always, is to cut through the noise, pull out those key insights so you feel informed, but without getting totally overloaded. Think of it as, well, your shortcut to understanding how we go from these big global challenges to frameworks we can actually use. It's quite a journey.
It really is. And what's striking in the materials is how these things that maybe seem separate, climate change, economic growth, what companies should be doing, they're actually deeply woven together. They all point to really one massive challenge, but also a massive opportunity for us. Understanding how they all connect is what's key.
Okay, so let's start with the really big picture. The warnings from scientists that kind of set the whole stage. Global warming, climate change, our sources are pretty clear. Global warming is that long-term heating up of the earth, the atmosphere, the oceans. And the main cause, well, it's the buildup of CO2 and other greenhouse gases, mostly from burning fossil fuels, oil, coal, natural gas. There's a pretty stark warning in there from some scientists saying, basically, the Earth cannot sustain much further industrialization if we keep going down this high emission path. That's a major challenge to how we do things now.
Absolutely. And that scientific alarm, it did spark some early global responses, though they were complex. One of the first big ones was the Kyoto Protocol back in 1997. It was a major international treaty, part of the UN's climate change efforts, trying to put goals into action. The original aim was ambitious, right? To get industrialized countries to cut their emissions 5% below 1990 levels and do it by 2010. But here's where you immediately saw the tension. These targets were seen as environmentally vital, sure, but many businesses, even whole economies, pushed back. They argued it would just drive up costs, hurt their competitiveness, maybe slow down growth. And that tension, well, it's still at the heart of the sustainable development debate today, isn't it? Balancing the planet's needs with immediate economic concerns.
That's a really key point, that early friction. It shows the trade-offs, right? But did the sources hint at anything else, like beyond just the cost complaints? Could these targets, even though they were tough, maybe push businesses to innovate, find new opportunities maybe? Because that shift from seeing it as just a burden to maybe an opportunity feels really important here.
That's a great question. And yes, while the first reaction was often about the cost, you can see in some of the thinking, even back then, that these targets kind of accidentally laid the groundwork for what we now call the green economy. Companies started looking into energy efficiency, developing cleaner tech, exploring renewables, maybe partly for compliance, sure, but also seeing, a future market there. Kyoto, even with its own issues and limitations, it really started a global conversation, an innovation push that's arguably still going. It showed that environmental policy isn't just about limits. It can also be about steering the economy toward more sustainable paths.
Okay, so the science is serious. The early attempts had friction, but maybe sparked something else. Which brings us to the core idea then. How do we operate differently? This is where the concept of sustainability really comes in. Our sources define it pretty consistently. It's the idea that the economy should work in ways that can just keep going indefinitely without wrecking the environment or using up all the resources we depend on. It's a fundamental shift for businesses. It's not just about next quarter's profit. It's about considering the long-term interests of, well, everyone in society, the environment in your decisions. That really challenges the old model of just endless growth on a planet that obviously has limits.
And it gets even trickier and maybe more urgent when you look globally.
Okay.
You have billions of people in developing countries who, quite rightly, want the same living standards people have in the industrialized world. It's a totally legitimate goal. But the sources warn, if that development just copies the old resource-heavy, polluting way, well, the world's resources just aren't enough. That adds this huge layer of complexity, doesn't it? Questions about fairness, who's responsible for what. Can everyone live like the wealthiest nations do now, using the same methods? The resources suggest probably not.
That is a huge dilemma. Is there a worry then that pushing these new sustainable models might actually hold back the growth that developing countries need to lift people out of poverty? It almost feels like asking them to skip a step that richer countries already took.
It's a very real concern, and yeah, it's a central tension you see in the discussions. But the sources suggest the goal isn't to stop growth in developing nations, but to change what kind of growth it is. And this is exactly where things like alternative energy become so vital. Things like wind power, solar, geothermal, they're presented as ways to grow economies, improve lives, without causing the same environmental harm. It's about decoupling growth from destruction. essentially.
Right, decoupling. And what about other options? I noticed our sources also mentioned nuclear power. How does that fit in?
Oh, yes, nuclear. It's definitely part of the conversation, but it's complex. Yeah. On one side, sources point out it's a proven way to get lots of electricity without carbon emissions, like consistent power, which is important. Base load power, they call it. But then, on the other side, you have big concerns, right? What do you do with the radioactive waste long term? Building the plants is incredibly expensive, and safety is always a question, especially after incidents like Fukushima. So some see it as maybe a necessary bridge, away from fossil fuels. Others see it as just too problematic. There's no easy answer there. It involves weighing different risks and priorities.
Okay, so we have these big principles, sustainability, decoupling, but making it real for companies day to day, that's the trick, isn't it? So what tools are there? This brings us to a really smart framework mentioned in our sources, the triple bottom line, or TBL. Apparently, it was popularized by a consultancy called Sustainability way back in the 90s. And the core idea at TBL is kind of revolutionary. It pushes companies to focus not just on the usual economic value profit, but just as much on the environmental and social value they create. And, importantly, the value they might destroy in those areas too. It's meant to be this comprehensive view, making companies look at a wider range of issues and processes to, minimize harm and create value more broadly. It's more strategic than just accounting.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here and highlighted in our materials is that it's not just about balancing three separate things side by side. There's a hierarchy, a dependency. The three lines are society, the economy, and the environment. But the sources make this powerful point. Society depends on the economy, and the economy depends on the global ecosystem, whose health represents the ultimate bottom line. That phrase, ultimate bottom line, is huge. It means fundamentally, all our human stuff, all our economic activity, it rests entirely on a healthy planet. Think about it, right? If a company messes up the environment, pollutes water, cuts down forests, destabilizes the climate, it's not just some side effect. It's actually undermining the foundation of its own future business, its workers' health, the stability of the markets it needs. It forces a total rethink of risk. Taking care of the environment isn't just a cost. It's like the most fundamental investment in staying viable. It supports everything else. Without a healthy ecosystem, society and the economy just can't thrive long term.
Wow, that really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? From thinking resources are endless to seeing this ultimate bottom line that underpins everything else. A total recalibration of success. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here today. It's quite the journey. We've looked at how those stark climate warnings led to things like the Kyoto Protocol and the immediate friction that caused. We explored how sustainability is redefining economic growth itself, raising big questions, especially for developing nations. And then we unpacked how businesses are being pushed beyond just profit, using frameworks like the triple bottom line to think about people and planet too.
Absolutely. And I think the real takeaway from this deep dive is that sustainable development isn't, just an environmental issue or just an economic one. It's more fundamental. It's about reimagining our whole relationship with the earth and with each other. It's a shift where the long-term health, that ultimate bottom line, the ecosystem has to come first. It's the basic requirement for any other kind of prosperity. Moving from just taking to thinking about renewal and stewardship and, well, a shared future.
So thinking about that, knowing the ecosystem really is our ultimate bottom line, and that our choices ripple outwards. Here's something to think about. What's maybe one small shift in your own decisions, big or small, that might lean into those long-term interests we've been talking about? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.